Bord Gáis Energy, putting customers at the core of under 20 and senior hurling championship action. Hashtag hurling to the core.
We're in Kilkenny this Thursday, July 11th in Hotel Kilkenny for a special live edition of the Throw-In podcast with Waterford legend John Mullane, Kilkenny great JJ Delaney, the Irish Independent's Vincent Hogan and the Herald's Conor McKeown. For more details go to independent.ie. Welcome to the Throw-In, independent.ie's GA podcast in association with Bord Gáis Energy. I'm Michael Verney. Will Slattery is away on holidays this week, but I'm joined by Colm Keys of the Irish Independent and the Sunday World's Seán McGoldrick to discuss a jam-packed GA weekend. Later in the show I'll be joined by Tyrone legend Peter Canavan to look at all the football qualifier action. But first, there's only one place to start this weekend, and that's Laois's historic victory over Dublin yesterday in the All-Ireland preliminary quarter-final in O'Moore Park. And I'm delighted to say we're joined by Laois manager Eddie Brennan on the line. Eddie, few people gave you a chance going into that game, but you were very confident.
Yeah, we were, and look, I suppose I spoke yesterday after the match, and I said, look, all week, I suppose, I would have been, bouncing with Tommy and Fran and Niall, and you're going, we were kind of trying to measure how much we prodded the lads during the week, because you kind of want them, we didn't want them to let this pass them by, and you're so, I suppose, conscious of how much you push them or how much you kind of intervene, because you don't want to be overpowering either with the guys. But I suppose up until Friday evening, we weren't sure, and it was just the one thing, and I said it there, despite the fact we were only after leaving training, I rang Niall and I said, Jesus, that was brilliant. I said that meeting was good, and two of the guys spoke at that, and it was genuine. And look, I suppose the most satisfying thing for me is that you're seeing guys that maybe were not, I suppose, having the greatest of confidence in themselves, in last November, and to see the way that, in a way, we've let them drive it, and to see them not being afraid to speak up in front of the group and to drive it on, because, and that to me is, I suppose, look, the job of management is to get the lads to a position where they take control of it. And I just was, left that meeting just going, okay, I think we have them. I think these guys are ready for it, and they're generally a quiet bunch by nature. And even yesterday now, they, we tried to get them to just roll with the occasion, to enjoy it, and not be afraid of it. And they did. They went out and they really, really expressed themselves. And particularly too, we had to come with a plan yesterday, and to a man, they executed the plan.
Just on it, Eddie, you've been in some successful dressing rooms, to say at least, during your own career. What was it in particular, maybe, about that meeting the other night? Was there anything in particular that stood out for you that kind of made you ring Niall after and just be so positive?
I was just, to be honest, Michael, it's just sometimes, years ago when we used to be poking around in Nolan Park, and I remember Peter Barry used to say to me, you can hear a rhythm in the ball being poked around, and if you closed your eyes, you can almost sense a mood. And we went into the dressing room, and every one of them, you could just sense there was a mood. And John Lennon spoke, and Matthew Whelan spoke, and Mark Kavanagh finished it, and it was just genuine. And you just sensed more the mood. And when they were speaking, it was genuine. It wasn't trying to just fill a silence. It wasn't trying to talk for the sake of it. And that to me is very pleasing, that the boys spoke when it came from a genuine kind of mindset. It came from a genuine trail of thought. And that, the most importantly, that they weren't afraid to say it, that they were well able to take it over. And it was something that I suppose you'd be very conscious of, is that it's all about letting them grow, and they grew all year, and particularly the last couple of weeks, they just really drove it on. And it was just, as I said, Michael, it was just a mood. You could almost sense a kind of an atmosphere in the dressing room, and even when the boys left the meeting room that night, that they were right, they were tuned into it.
What was it like last night after, Eddie? I know that the great Buff Egan was with you there for a while last night, I think, enjoying the celebrations. But there must have been an unbelievable mood after, between the scenes on the pitch and even back in the hotel and things like that. Lads must have been euphoric after.
Yeah, Jesus, it's gas. We get fed there after training sessions there. Bosco Ramsbottom looks after the food, and I know how he does a barbecue the Friday night before a big match, and we had a barbecue lined up for yesterday as well, and we were able to go over to Abbey Leaks Golf Club, and the whole lot of us, just the whole panel, were there together, and we gave a couple of hours there together, and that's what that's what the memory is all about. That's what I suppose the bunch of players, and for me, will remember for a long time was, you know, the bit of fun we had there, and you know, the buff came in and the boys went out, and I think there was even an old driving competition on the first tee box, you know. So, and it was just to see even just the players themselves, how much satisfaction they got out of it, and you know, I suppose, look, the other side was they had fun along the way as well. Like, they enjoyed it, and I suppose you're fierce conscious of the serious side of performing at this level, but there's a fun element of it. It's a sport at the end of the day, and you're playing it since you're a small, you know, child, and it's what you want to do. And that was the one thing that you want lads to do. You don't want them to be tense. You don't want them to be afraid of the occasion. And like you said there, it's that couple of hours that we spent together yesterday evening were brilliant.
Just to have Colm Keys and Seán McGoldrick here with me as well. Eddie, Colm might come in here.
Congratulations, Eddie. That's another
Thanks,
one of Brian Cody's great teams now that has made a strong managerial claim. Henry earlier in the year, and of course DJ and yourself. So well done. Fantastic performance,
much,
obviously, Eddie. Just curious, last December, after I think it was the Carlow game, you suggested that maybe there was up to about 20 players that had turned you down to come in. It's a very interesting one to see from where you were then to where you were now, the appetite for hurling. How many of those players would have come back in, and do you think this creates the environment now for more of those players, maybe some of the other better club players in the county, to come in now, because it creates a new environment for you in future years?
Yeah, it does. And look, I suppose like Anton too, you know, and I remember listening to Michael discussing it there one night about, you know, my frustration at lads not committing. But I suppose when I delve into that a little bit, or put a bit of context on that, it was just, you know, I felt in the context of a guy being a young, ambitious, good club hurler, why he wouldn't want to come in. And look, maybe there's various reasons. Maybe they were down to carry on or setups that went before me, or different reasons, or whatever it was. And sometimes that's down to work commitment, sometimes it's down to different reasons. But at the same time, look, it was probably 22 plus when you take into consideration, look, 5 or 6 lads left during the year and we moved on, lads. But I think just we kept looking at the lads that were there, and that was the most important thing. Like, that the guys that were there, you know, some of them probably wouldn't be regarded as some of the best hurlers in the county, but they were very, very honest, they were very hard working. And I suppose that was the one big plus that myself and Niall had coming in, was that we had no loyalties to anybody. We had no kind of and that's not a kind of a reflection on Fran or Tommy or anything like that. It was just that we would have had no favouritism towards anyone, and we were starting with a blank canvas. So I mean, what I've seen is, look, we have a couple of guys in there, and like I said, they may not be considered the most skillful club hurlers in the scene here, but they worked really, really hard. They were good guys. They contributed something to the group, and they brought something to the group, and that's the way. Look, no matter what, you know, frustrations I had and little episodes at the start of the year, you kept kind of looking at, okay, look at what we have, and we'll work with those guys. And it just means we probably did a little bit more one-on-one stuff with some of these guys and got them to do a job for the team.
Just on next Sunday, obviously, Eddie, I know the timing is probably not ideal, and having a week off between games is not ideal, but a massive test. There'd hardly be any trouble getting these lads up for Tipperary, though, by all accounts.
No, God, no. From my background, I would have always considered them our noisy neighbours, but I suppose Laois have them as their noisy neighbours too. So, yeah. Look, I mean, it's just even to see, you know, I suppose the kick the players are getting over, because, you know, they're back in Croke Park twice in a fortnight, in an All-Ireland quarter-final. And sure, look, I mean, that's what you play hurling for. And for them yesterday, like, I mean, it's just, as players, you know, I just draw huge satisfaction standing back and watching them and how they enjoyed yesterday. And you just go, Jesus, the time of their lives. Like, they won a final in Croke Park 7 days ago. They played in front of their own crowd yesterday, and it was just a historic performance. I mean, the 7th of July will live in their memories for a long, long time. And like, the reward they get for that is back up to Croke Park next week. And, you know, I'm hearing already there's queues outside the ticket office above in the Centre of Excellence at the moment. So overall, it's brilliant that there's a bounce in the county out of that. And, you know, I would have felt, you know, I gave a view on this preliminary quarter-final and what I thought of it. And there'd be no point in me going on yesterday if we were bet and having my whinge. And I just genuinely felt, I said, it's a nothing match, and and I'm not it's easy to say that now because we have bucked the trend in relation to that. But I just think, I would have felt, Jesus, you're not expected to do anything with that. And from that point of view, the Laois players themselves missed a massive opportunity last week to just enjoy what was a great week for them and get out and sow the seed for the next crew of young lads, get to the cool camps. And look, they may be lost out on that a little bit, and you're looking at a county that's trying to get back up, and you say, look, games development officers and Board and Og are tasked with trying to, develop it and be innovative and saying, how do we get it? Well, here it is free of charge because they won a cup last week in Croke Park, and now young lads have people that they look up to. They look up to the players that togged out yesterday, and like even you look at our half back line at the end of that match, there was 17, 18 and 19 I think was making up our half back line, and that's for guys that go home to their families, and that to me is, look, I understand that side of it, and it's just brilliant to see the satisfaction that their parents are getting out of this as well.
Eddie, thanks a million for joining us, and best of luck next weekend. I hope you keep on rolling.
Please God, thanks very much, guys.
Thanks, Eddie. Talk to you soon. See you. Bye. Seán, just your own reaction to that. I suppose one of the biggest shocks in the last couple of decades, nearly, and definitely one of the biggest shocks Dublin have had. They seem to be getting used to these shocks in recent years. But what did you make on it yesterday? Few expected it to happen by all accounts.
I suppose it was a tricky match for Dublin because their form outside Parnell Park has been suspect. But you would have expected them to win. But looking at the match just on the highlights, I listened to the radio, they just seemed to be totally off the pace, and that's no disrespect to Laois. I mean, it was terrific. As Eddie Brennan said there, they came with a game plan and they executed it beautifully. And it's a terrific boost for, I'd say, not just for the weaker hurling counties, but also for all the weaker football counties that you can dream big, and sometimes your dreams come true. And okay, they'll face a really difficult task next Sunday, but they'll enjoy the next few days. And as Eddie said there, to see Laois hurling has been down in the doldrums for a long time. I mean, back in the when Offaly made their breakthrough, Laois were probably at that level, and there was a famous, was it the Leinster final where Pádraig Horan got a goal through the side netting, which was a decisive score, and it was Offaly that actually made the breakthrough and Laois didn't. But they're still probably a long way off being a top tier team. But I mean, what Eddie Brennan has achieved is unbelievable. Like, I was just reading the statistics there. I think there was something like 22 people or 22 players left the squad or didn't commit during the year. And they wouldn't have a huge, there's only 8 senior clubs in the county, so they wouldn't have a huge pick to begin with. He has got the absolute most out of them. And can you imagine the sort of confidence that will bring? I'm sure lots more people or players will want to join the squad, come next season. So it's a great all use round story for Laois. It's a bad defeat though for Dublin, and it'll be a long winter for them.
Definitely, yeah. Just on that column, it's probably going to have a bit of a ripple effect on Laois. And by all accounts, it wasn't a hit and run job or anything like that. They dominated the game and led from pillar to post.
Yeah, and we're very impressive in the McDonagh Cup too. I think we saw that in the final. Very, very impressive side. And I take up Sean's point there, and we've spoke to Eddie about that already. He took that job, and things were quite fractious in Laois after last year's county championship. There was obviously a very controversial county final between Camross and Rathdowney Errol, and Ross King was at the centre of that, and he was considering his future at that time. But to be able to come into that environment and smooth over things as best he could and bring people along with him, I think is a fantastic to point to signpost Laois players and the team in the right direction, and to set those goals and achieve them all. And they've probably, with this win, have gone beyond them for this year. So a fantastic achievement for the team, and it obviously opens up debate about structures of the championship once again. If Laois can beat Dublin, well then why not a 6-team championship? The impact is obviously there for clubs because there's one less weekend for everybody. If you see what Kilkenny played a round of club championships in between in their 3-week break, so that's obviously a factor. But if Laois can beat Dublin in a match of that importance, it really does invite a review of the 5-team structure in Leinster. There's obviously consequences of it, but Laois have really placed that marker down now for Leinster Council and the GA in general to consider.
And the other thing is the actual timing of the preliminary quarterfinals. Like it is completely unfair that they have to play a week after the McDonagh Cup.
Makes it all the more remarkable that they were able to win it.
Well, actually, one of the remarkable things about it is that if the original proposal in 2017 for the restructuring of the hurling championship had gone through, that game would never have happened, because re-entry for McDonagh Cup, or entry for McDonagh Cup teams into the mainstream McCarthy Cup Championship was not under consideration until the special congress, and I think it actually brokered. There was a special congress in September 2017, I think, and it was the clause that brokered the passing of this motion for it to happen, that the McDonagh Cup teams, the finalists, would get an opportunity to come back, and so that fixture would never have taken place if the original proposal went
and
through.
the other thing is that brings us on to another debate about Tier 2 football. I know it's slightly different, but I mean there would be a school of thought which I'd agree that one of the weaknesses in this current proposal is that it's a standalone competition like the McDonagh Cup, and that there's no re-entry to the All-Ireland Championship. And I think they should, and I think what happened yesterday should give the GA food for thought about to allow the finalists in, we'll call it the Paddy O'Shea Cup, or the
pretty
Tier 2.
difficult, Sean, but to given the number of teams in what would be a Tier 2 football championship, it would be very, very difficult to schedule it to keep it within that September, early September timeframe, end of August, early September timeframe. So that would be very difficult in that regard, unless you're going to stretch the championship out to the end of September again. It's a little bit easier in hurling. Just note Eddie's point in his interview, his point about the scheduling of the preliminary quarterfinals, that perhaps maybe they should look at bringing the McDonagh Cup forward by a week in its entirety, possibly putting it on before a Leinster football final. That could be a consideration. I just don't have a calendar in front of me to work out the dates, but I think it could be a consideration that maybe it could start a week earlier and finish a week earlier to allow that 2-week time frame, and for a county like Laois to enjoy a McDonagh Cup success.
Massive achievement for Laois, obviously, Seán, but as you kind of alluded to earlier, like, it's a massive setback for Dublin hurling, having beaten Galway and all the kind of hoopla that came with that, and you kind of thought they were going to kick on, and it just didn't happen for them yesterday.
No, I think you play team sport, and you probably know the dynamics. If you're mentally not tuned in, or if you expect a particular result, and if the game doesn't start to work out the way you had anticipated, it's very hard to lift yourself. And they just looked dead on their feet, and they made, for them, very elementary mistakes. And but it is a big setback for them, because I'm sure in the back of their minds they were thinking ahead of next Sunday, and maybe that
the bookmakers definitely were anyway, because they had the game priced up and everything.
And maybe subconsciously, I'm sure Matty Kenny was preaching all week to them. We have to take each game on its merits, but sometimes in sport you expect things to happen, but they just didn't. They and not until maybe the last 5 or 10 minutes they got a bit of rhythm going, but they probably expected the result and it just didn't happen. But and I think they probably had in the back of their minds, the match against Tipperary, which obviously never happened now. And actually, the ironic thing is that I thought that they would give Tipperary a decent run, but there'll be a lot of soul searching to be done over the winter. But I mean, it's a setback. It's not terminal. They were beaten by Antrim years ago.
That's right, yeah, under Dado,
and they recovered from that, so they just have to knuckle down and start again in the autumn, and look forward to next season.
Just on the other game, Colm, you were in Mullingar yesterday, preliminary quarter-final, Westmeath, 20 points, Cork, I think it was 140, was it, in the end? It's the first time 40 points has been hit in Championship?
By my reckoning anyway, yes. Waterford hit Offaly for 135 a couple of years back.
Thanks for bringing it up.
Yeah. So 140, Cork looked content to go for points the whole time. Westmeath did drop 2 players back as sweepers, and it was as broad as it was long, because Cork just stretched it out, picked their points from long range. I think they had four players who actually scored 5 points from play, and then off the bench, Robbie O'Flynn came in. He was impressive too, 1-4 at half-time. Alan Cadigan was superb in the first half. He left wing, right wing, wherever he went, he picked up ball and just so sharp. I thought Cork looked sharp. I thought they accurate. It's always difficult to gauge because Westmeath are obviously a standard or two below, a few levels below them, so it's very, very difficult to gauge. But I would think, apart from not creating a few more goal chances, and you'd have to think that they were just content to take the points, that Cork got everything out of that game that they would have wanted.
But we learned much about their defence yesterday, which is probably...
Well, they conceded 20 points against Westmeath, but the game really did taper off. It was 9 in the first half and 11 in the second half, but it did taper off in the second half. Yeah, I think they've issues in defence. I think there's issues maybe with pace in one or two areas, just to get that sense that they're not the quickest covering the ground. Their forwards are superb. They could very well have the best point scoring attack in the game. They really, really can. They're accurate. They're fast. I think Cadigan has added, after missing last year, he has added something extra to them. And they played Dara Fitzgibbon at centre forward as well. In the absence of Aidan Walsh, he pushed in. And that adds something to them too. I mean,
six forwards that can really hurt you, don't they?
They can. The 6 forwards that can run at you, they have pace, and they can score. And as I said, they got everything out of it. And I have to say, from the outset, I thought, given where they were last year, that if they could find a little extra, that they'd be right up there on the shoulders of Limerick again. They were very close to beating them last year. They've already beaten them this year in League and Championship. I think they'll beat Kilkenny. Obviously, there'll be a big reaction from Kilkenny after losing to Wexford, especially back in Croke Park again. But I do think Cork have the game to beat Kilkenny. I think their range of scorers, the distance that they can score from, I think a lot is pointing in the direction. Yes, there's concerns about their defence, but to score 140 is a considerable achievement, because these games have been happening for the last number of years and no one has got to that, so it's a good reflection for them.
Just quickly, Seán, on the 2 games next weekend, obviously Kilkenny and Cork and Tip and Laois, how do you see the two of them going?
I'd agree with Colm. I think Cork will beat Kilkenny. The other one is actually I was just noticing the 2 matches are being shown live on television. They're going to the second one, the Laois Tipperary one, will clash with Kerry and Mayo in Killarney. So the 2 RTE channels will be sports related. But I'd like to think that Laois would put in a performance against Tipperary, but it will be a difficult match for them. They've been on 2 highs and 2. I mean, just physically, they've had McDonagh Cup campaign. I mean, and then they had yesterday. So I mean, physically they'll probably be. They won't be at their sharpest, and there'll probably be a certain amount of mental tiredness on their part. Whereas Tipperary will be smart to get back after a really substandard performance against Limerick in the Munster final, and you would expect them to win comfortably. The other match will be a lot tighter. I suppose Kilkenny's problems are well documented at this stage. They're up front, they're over reliant on TJ Reid, and Cork. Again, as Colm alluded to, there's question marks over their defence, but I think they could be the dark horses. I mean, for the All-Ireland, I mean, they went very close last year. I mean, but for Quaid's super save or super intervention at the last minute, they would almost certainly have been in the final, and who knows what might have happened then. So I think they certainly have All-Ireland ambitions. I think Kilkenny's team building process is an ongoing one. It's probably not at that level yet, but I mean, any Kilkenny team in Croke Park in the latter stages of the All-Ireland, I mean, they will give a good account of themselves, but I would expect Cork to win it.
That's all from the hurling side of things. Let's turn our attention to football. Delighted to say we're joined by Tyrone legend Peter Canavan on the line. Tyrone had a great win at the weekend, Peter, but the standout tie of the weekend was Galway and Mayo. And would it be fair to say Mayo just seemed to keep finding a bit more through the back door?
Yeah, you've got to hand it to Mayo. They always keep coming back for more. I thought against Armagh at times they looked a tired team. They were like a team that were very much on the ropes. Injuries was catching up with a few men, and I didn't see that performance coming. Now, with the benefit of hindsight, Mayo had lost the last 3 championship games to Galway. I knew after the draw was made, James Horan apparently was delighted because he knew it was one game that he would have no difficulty in getting his troops motivated for. They were keen on revenge, and that was very evident at a pep in their step. And this word momentum keeps cropping up with teams that come through the back door, and they had been playing competitive football a few weeks before that. They had a good game against Down, close game against Armagh. So they were already up to speed with championship football, and I think that was very evident in the first 10 or 15 minutes of the game. But from James Horan's point of view, I think he deserves a lot of credit. He's made big calls at different stages in the game in recent games. Against Down, he moved Lee Keegan out to the middle of the field for the last 10 or 15 minutes, which transformed the game. He brought Kevin McLaughlin out from the full forward line against Armagh. It turned the game. His decision to play to reinstall David Clark is reaping huge reward for him. And the last couple of things that at the start of the year he needed to unearth a few young forwards that were going to make a difference on this Mayo side, and he's managed to do that. Darren Cohen has been superb in the last 3 or 4 games that he's played. And then young James Carr comes in and scores 2 goals. So James is ticking a lot of boxes at the minute, and he's got his men moving nicely, and they're now well set up for the Super 8s.
Just on that point, Colm, I suppose one of the criticisms of Mayo would have been maybe a lack of squad depth and maybe a lack of kind of maybe scoring forwards or that big threat. But Darren Cohen and a few more that they've introduced there, looks like serious depth there at the moment.
Darren Cohen is bringing a level of accuracy to Mayo at the moment that really only Andy Moran has delivered, as he did in 2017 when he was Footballer of the Year, and obviously Killian O'Connor before that. So Cohen's ability, his accuracy has been phenomenal. 5 against Roscommon, 4 against Armagh, and 4 again on Saturday night. So Carr has he certainly flagged what he could do in the league final against Kerry. I thought he was superb in a few cameos that he produced that day. He obviously suffered injuries in the meantime, but his goal, the power, the acceleration, just the bit of physical presence he has as well, all combined give Mayo a dimension that I don't think they have really had in those positions. The ability to actually go by and break the line is something that hasn't been so prevalent in Mayo teams, and to a lesser extent Fionn McDonagh has been giving it. Remember, Fionn McDonagh scored 1-3 in a league match against Tyrone earlier this year, and he also shows acceleration and great ability to kick the ball on the run. Now, he wasn't probably as prominent the last day. He was quite good against Armagh, but he wasn't prominent the last day. But for me, Carr brings a level of power and acceleration and just ability to break the line that really augurs well for this Mayo team. Cohen has been around before. Cohen has been in on various Mayo squads before and just hasn't cut it at the time. But obviously James Horan has identified him and his accuracy as something that can really, really help to develop the team, and I think it has worked really well for them.
Yeah, Cohen is interesting. He's 27. So he's not a teenager anymore, but he has been tried before, but for some reason he has blossomed under Horan.
Just Peter, on the flip side, then I suppose looking at Galway, kind of looked like maybe they were caught between 2 stools at various stages in the game, particularly at the start over the style of play that they were playing. Obviously, it was much publicised, a lot of changes before the off with Bernard Power coming in and even changing fullback as well. Like, where do you think Galway kind of go from here, and do you see Kevin Walsh in charge next year?
He has a big decision to make. I'm not too sure if he's going to get any more out of this group or not. He was disappointed with their performance on Saturday. Okay, they rallied very well. They came back into it. They didn't throw in the towel. But for the first 15 to 20 minutes, I was very disappointed, as I was for their second half performance against Roscommon. And likewise, their last game in the National League, there was a second half capitulation against Tyrone as well. So they did play like a team that was trying to move on. Okay, we know they have a very defensive style. I think they were trying to be a wee bit more attack-minded. But the second goal that James Carr got, now, if that was last year or the year before, as soon as that ball was kicked out short, Galway would have had a number of men retreating. They would have been in a very strong defensive position, ready for the like of Carr or Paddy Durkin or somebody breaking through. But that wasn't the case on Saturday night. So at various stages, it looked as if they were a team that weren't 100% sure about what approach they were adopting. So, look, they still have really talented players, and bear in mind, Damien Comer had been injured for most of the season, a main man for them. Cian Malloy has come back from injury. So he probably hasn't had his full contingent to have a fair crack at it this year, but I'd say Kevin has brought them on well since he's come in. You have to bear in mind where Galway were a number of years ago. But can he get any more out of this group? I'm not so sure.
Just looking at your own county, Tyrone, Peter, very impressive again, it has to be said. It was a bit of a no contest really after the half-hour mark. They have been impressive through the back door, and they're going into the Super 8s now in a very, very strong position.
They are, and there's a healthy competition there among the squad as well. There's a number of men champing a bit to get on. Contrasting with Galway, Tyrone were very assured. They knew exactly what their style of play was on Saturday. And unlike the Donegal game, they were happy to let Kevin hit the ball short, and they were going to retreat and try and turn them over in the halfway line. So look, we know their style of play is very clear. The players appear to be very comfortable with it, and as the game opens up, they're not afraid to kick it in either. Cathal McShane is in supreme form at the minute, a brilliant target man. Be it high or low, he'll make a fair attempt to win it, whatever way it comes in, the ball's sticking to him. So he certainly has brought another dimension to their style of play. And again, they're a team that's very well set up. This game next Saturday is massive in terms of the overall group. If Tyrone win next Saturday, I would take it that's them set for an All-Ireland semi-final. Roscommon obviously will have something to say about that. So that's the big game in Group 2 as far as I'm concerned this Saturday.
Just on that column, Tyrone is definitely not the route they wanted to take, but it's kind of opened up for them nicely.
But it's a route they're so used to at this stage. I mean, Tyrone really have the measure of how to come through and to launch a backdoor campaign, and they've obviously won 2 All-Ireland finals now, obviously in 2008 and 2005. That's a long time ago, but they've since got back into strong positions, including last year. So they know the route, and once they got over that initial game against Longford, it showed that the appetite was there. And okay, it was a little bit of a stumble, but they won reasonably well. The appetite was there. Tyrone see the end line in September. That's where they were aiming for, and they obviously have set it as a goal, and it didn't matter if they were going to lose. They quickly recovered and were able to get up and go again. I think Cathal McShane is just adding something so different. And it's interesting to see all the teams that are progressing or making strides this year. They've all added something to their inside lines. We've already spoken about Darren Cohen and James Carn, what they've done for the inside line for Mayo. If you look at Brian Hurley's return after injury for Cork, he has transformed them. Conor Cox has come into the Roscommon team, and he's given them something as well. You could even say Cormac Costello in the early stages of Leinster and through the league for Dublin, although they have a wealth of talent. So all of these teams that are making progress all have added something, but I think McShane is a huge factor for Tyrone, because they can actually go back and play that counter-attacking game that they are so good at, in the knowledge that they have a ball winner and a very good decision maker inside that can win his own ball, and a little bit of ball that maybe is against him as well. He can take that down and use it so well. And one of the points he scored on the turn off his right foot was so instinctive for a guy that's only playing on the inside line for so long. It's like something the man on the other end of the line here would have tried regularly and done so well in the past. Just a real instinctive turn, almost in mid-air, just to swivel around and score off his right. I thought it was fantastic, and it showed just how much he's taken to full forward.
Peter, just I suppose one of the big takeouts of the game would have been the third black card for Peter Hart. At the moment, he's ruled out of the Roscommon game, which would be a huge loss. I think Mickey Hart was fairly confident that they'd get off one, if not all three of the black cards. Just, is there anything in particular that he's doing or leaving himself kind of open to those kind of black cards?
Yeah, well, you're right. Mickey was somewhat animated and agitated after the game on Saturday talking about this. Yeah, look, Petey has to look at the way that he's tackling. He's attempting to make shoulder tackles and hitting with the leg, and some referees are interpreting that as a trip. But I think it was well covered last night on the Sunday game. The lads, each one of them, said it was laughable that somebody can get black cards for that there, with a cynical no, with a deliberate no. And when you compare some of the things that are happening on the pitch and that referees are letting go, so there's a serious degree of inconsistency there that's not getting any better. But I would be very surprised if at least two of those three cards are not rescinded. Just lastly, Peter, you fancy Tyrone's chances of getting out of Super 8s? I do, and back to the point I made earlier, it's this Saturday night, and Roscommon is a big game, and if they can win that, I think Group 2 could see the possibility of the last games being dead rubbers, and that you could have thrown in Dublin already through and meeting each other, and with Roscommon and Cork playing when they've nothing to play for. Group 1, on the other hand, I think it'll go down to the wire. They're all capable of beating each other. Donegal, Mayo and Kerry, and there's some great games in that group. But from a own point of view, yes, I'll be confident that they'll make an All-Ireland semi-final, but they need to get off to a good start this Saturday. Brilliant stuff, Peter. Thanks a million for joining us. I appreciate that. Cheers, Colm. Right, Michael. Thanks, Peter. Cheers. Bye-bye. Just looking at the other two qualifier games, Seán, obviously, Cork and Laois was relatively tight up until half-time, but as Colin mentioned earlier, kind of the return to form of Brian Hurley and even Mark Collins inside, two Castlehaven clubmates, they were outstanding the other night.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I suppose Cork have probably been one of the stories of the championship, as opposed to, at the end of the league they were in dire straits. Like, they got relegated to Division 3 for the first time, and to see a team or a county the size of Cork to be in Division 3 was unusual, or it was a bad blow to the Munster Football Championship. But ironically, they were the one team that they were the one defeated provincial finalists that emerged with kind of credit, because most people were expecting them to be swamped by Kerry, but they put up a fighting performance. They scored 3 goals, and they didn't win, but they came out of the Munster series in better shape than they went into it. And as you say, in the second half they pulled away from Laois, which I suppose is to be anticipated because of the respective ratings in the two counties. And the Brian Hurley story is one of the stories of the championship. He had a really serious injury.
Ripped the hamstring off the bone, did he?
Yes.
Yeah. He might have done it twice, did he?
I think so.
Yeah. Not long after the comeback.
Yeah.
He did it
and
again,
I think there was a complication with his surgery as well, which it had the potential to be devastating for him. But he came back, and it's only in recent times that, or basically in the championship, that he's got his confidence back. It was his brother who was the shining light during the league. So it's they look in a good position, and even though they're outsiders in that group, it'll be interesting to see how they go.
I only saw the highlights, obviously, like everybody else last night. He was involved in everything, setting up a goal for Mark Collins, scoring 2 himself. Just such vibrant energy he brings.
The first goal as well, a kind of volley as well.
It was a very ambitious. He could have missed that and fallen flat on his face for that. But it was a very tidy finish. But it's just his movement across the line. He was constant motion, so hard to mark, and it was reminiscent of where he was 5 years ago when he destroyed Dublin in a league semi-final. I think Dublin were Cork 10 points up or something like that at half-time, and Hurley did so much. They lost the game subsequently, and you can maybe attribute some of their downfall. I'm not so sure, can you either, but you can attribute some of that to, that day in particular. And actually they reached the league final the year after as well and lost that heavily. So those two, even though they progressed so far, you wonder, in the long term what impact it had on them. Even though they reached the Munster final again after that, just reaching those finals and not being able to close them out maybe had some kind of impact. But Hurley's absence from Cork, and we see the impact he's had over the last few weeks, was really significant for them. And obviously Rory Deane looked to have played really well again. Those driving runs down the middle, lovely close control, and always seems to make the right decision with a hand pass. And even last year against Kerry in the Munster final, and they only scored 2-4 down in Páirc Uí Chaoimh, he was very good that evening too. So he's a strong runner. They have a nice bit going for them, Cork. Again, no pressure on them going into Super 8s. They've probably ticked a few boxes that they would have set for themselves. Getting there would have been one of them, and it gives them an opportunity now to develop. Obviously, they have a very large gap with Tyrone to close from last year's fourth round qualifier, but it does give them an opportunity to continue rebuilding again.
And if reports are to be believed, actually, they're supposed to have beaten Dublin in a challenge match.
Yeah.
And again, Hurley was supposed to have played really well in that famous challenge match at this stage, but that was before the championship started, and also had beaten Galway well. So their challenge match form has been...
form has actually been, because even though they got relegated, the form has been actually good for
it was the first 4 games of the league that cost them.
Yeah, they picked up towards the end of the league.
They ended the league well, and if these reports are to be believed, they did well on the challenge game circuit, and then they have followed on. And it's interesting, like Dublin, probably if they have a weakest link, it's probably their full backline. So it'll be very interesting to see.
They play a nice brand. Obviously, it's going to be a different test completely on Saturday night.
Yeah, you would think that back in Croke Park and back where they haven't had great memories against Dublin, it could get a little bit ugly for them, because I would think Dublin aim to have their business wrapped up in their first 2 games in Croke Park, or should we say at home. But 2 games in Croke Park against Cork and Roscommon, it's evident that Dublin would be really, really keen to put this away. But they have injury concerns in defence too, around James McCarthy and Johnny Cooper. Johnny Cooper has a long-term foot injury.
When's the last time he played?
I think it was back in the league. He certainly hasn't played in the championship so far. So he has an aggravating foot injury that has kept him out and has been slow to heal. And obviously James McCarthy did ligament damage the last day, and while the prognosis was good, I wouldn't expect we'll see him out for this game either. But they have reserves, and I'm sure they will be keen to road test him. I think we'll see a bit more of Rory O'Carroll over the next 2 games too.
Just on your own county column, obviously, I think they booked a trend of beating Leinster finalists at the weekend. It wasn't
first in 10 years. First since Kildare in
Wicklow.
2009. So yeah, everything they set out to do from the start of the year, they have achieved. They've got promotion to Division 1. They reached the Leinster final. It didn't go anything like what they would have planned for, but I think when they reviewed it, they realised that they weren't as bad as the scoreline suggests, and to hold Dublin to 5 points and win a lot of individual duels during that first half in defence, and how good Conor McGill, the full back, was. They took a lot from that. A lot of bad shot selections, bad accuracy, things like that. The big test for them was, would they recover? They had a very strong league record against Clare over the last 3 years, and they just about got over the line. So you can allow for the mental scarring of the Leinster final and the pressure that they were under to go down, because this was really the big game to get into the Super 8s. I think they'll be out of their depth against all 3 teams. They'll obviously look for performance and look for, to run players out at that level, give them a taste of it, because they're facing 7 more of these type of games next spring in Division 1. I do think, I won't say they've overachieved, because they've achieved everything that they set out, and they've availed of kind draws through Leinster and probably getting Clare instead of one of the other teams, Mayo, whether it be Mayo or Tyrone. They probably got the luck of the draw there, but they've exploited it, and they now have an opportunity just to find out how strong the top level of football is, and they will get that now over the next 10 games, presuming that they don't get an 11th game with an All-Ireland semi-final, which I think they'll be under pressure, really. Depth of their squad will be really, really tested. I don't expect they'll win a game, but I think they'll be looking for a performance or two out of it, and just to acclimatise to that level, and maybe regenerate a bit of interest in the county. I think there are players coming. There are some strong underage teams that you would think would come, individual players. Maybe the collective of those teams is greater than the individual strengths in some cases, but I think they will be able to bring on more players, and the team will change probably over the next few years.
It'll be just interesting to see how Donald Keoghan performs in the Super Race, because he's probably he's an outstanding candidate for an All-Star award at the moment. If they're being given out tomorrow, he'd be there in the half-back line, and he's the one Meath player that would walk onto the Dublin team, so it'll be interesting to see how he performs.
I'd say he's if we call it the post-Sean Boylan era up to 2001, and if you take it the last 2 decades, I would say he's been, with Stephen Bray, been Meath's best post-Sean Boylan player.
Does he play a bad game?
By some distance. Not really. I haven't. No. But he started off as a man-marking defender. I mean, he was locking down really, really good forwards, Johnny Doyle and Kevin McManaman, and he was putting them out of games in 2012. But obviously the exposure, the constant exposure, the gates were open in front of him so often. He was always the man marker in the Meath defence. He was very, very good at it, but it just became there was so many requirements for him that they changed his game up, and he's a very good footballer, and obviously
he made a tackle in the last minute yesterday, which basically saved him.
The foul. The foul.
It
was 100% a goal. It was a hand pass, and it was a goal. Yeah, definitely. Just smart, and he obviously the goal he scored or set up as well was brilliant as well.
Yeah, he's good. He's a good leader. He's a good leader, and he obviously very good to drive forward. He set up a lot of goals this year. He scored goals and he set them up. I mean, he won a penalty against Laois. He obviously set up a goal the last day too. So, yeah, he's a really, really, really strong player. A good player to build the team around.
Just a quick word on Colm Collins and Clare. Seán obviously just fell short by a point yesterday. Stayed going right till the end. Maybe if they tipped over a couple more points earlier, they would have possibly pushed extra time. But the job he has done, I think he's the third longest serving inter-county manager at the moment, behind Mickey Hart and probably.
Well, he's the same as
Jim Gavin.
He has the same number of. No, Jim Gavin's on the 7th year, isn't he?
7th year, yeah.
So Colm Collins is third behind Mickey Hart and Jim Gavin.
Now that Malachy O'Rourke has gone.
He has taken them from Division 4 up to Division 2. He has held them there now for a third year. They're going into a third year in Division 2. They have exerted some dominance over Cork during that period, and they've reached an All-Ireland quarter-final, and they very nearly reached another series of All-Ireland quarter-finals yesterday. So I think he's done a phenomenal job. I'm not so sure whether he will stay on. There will certainly be a strong appetite within Clare to keep him there, and with this generation of players, Gary Brennan, Cathal O'Connor,
Jamie Malone.
He was away.
So he has, relative to everything, he has done as good a managerial job, given his resources and their tradition and everything, as anyone. In the game.
And they're very unlucky that they just happen to be in the same province as Kerry, which it's a momentous year.
He was pretty close to getting out last year, and changed his mind probably after last year to give it another go, but they would get it very, very hard to replace him at this stage.
Just quickly before we finish up, gents, our Board Gosh Energy Rising Stars of the week, a really, really busy weekend. My own Rising Star is, well, there's a couple of them, but Aaron Dunphy from Laois kind of only burst onto the scene the last year to actually managed a Banagher College team against a Burson Ossory College side that he was playing on. We actually had two lads on him the same day. He was as big then as he is now, and he literally has everything. It's taken a bit of time to fill out, but it's an outstanding prospect. And as Eddie Brennan said, they finished yesterday with a half-back line, 17, 18 and 19 years old, which is phenomenal. Great sign for their future. Colm, anyone in particular stand out yourself?
It was fantastic. Leinster minor final in Navan on Saturday, and Kildare so much talent in Kildare, and the guy I would pick out is Aaron Brown, who scored 1-7 for them. It went to extra time, just ahead of Luke Swan, who has impressed me during
Is that the hurler as well?
He's a dual player, really strong. Physical player, so they'd be the two, and obviously Owen Bagnall, who also scored highly for Kildare as well. But above all, Aaron Brown would be the one for me.
Seán, anyone stand out yourself over the weekend?
Well, obviously James Carr, who was the Mayo goal scoring hero on Saturday night, and a second goal is a contender for goal of the season already. And I was just looking at his history last night. He comes from a very small club in Mayo called Arda, which is a small area outside Ballina, and I think he's the first player from the club to make the Mayo senior team. But he's part of their Mayo under-21 team. They won in All-Ireland, and he is definitely... We saw him making his senior debut in the league final, and he showed his potential that day. So I think we'll be seeing a lot of him in the next few weeks in the Super 8s.
Brilliant stuff. Seán, Colm, thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Michael. Thank you.
That's all for this week, folks. Don't forget to subscribe to The Throw-In on independent.ie, Spotify, Apple and Google Podcasts. We'll be back again next Monday reviewing all the action, including the All-Ireland hurling quarterfinals and the first round of the Super 8s. Thanks a million for listening, and goodbye.
Bord Gáis Energy, putting customers at the core of under 20 and senior hurling championship action. #hurling to the core.